Hey everyone, welcome to Unfiltered Faith Sessions, where we cut through the crap and get to the point. Today we're talking about the epidemic of apathy, better known as laziness. I think that where I see this most is I have friends now that are, you know, managers, they own businesses. Basically they're at the stage of life like I am where you see more about the hiring process and less about the day-to-day grind. Though you still do that, there's more emphasis on finding quality people to make up a team. And it's getting harder. You don't see the drive as much. You see a lot of up and coming folks they're kind of lazy. You got to watch them closer. They don't have as much drive. They don't have as much potential to grow. And it's not by that the opportunities aren't there. It's just that they're just satisfied with mediocre. I mean, we marketed this in America as the American dream, where you can have the potential to really better your life or better your family's life. And I see this coming out of poverty. Those individuals that come from other countries where it's harder to make your way in life, or those who are even in this country, say they come from a poor family or whatnot, they see and know what it means to struggle. But let's be honest, with an empire like America that started out in humble beginnings, America is a superpower. And, what happens with that is there is more abundance in a lot of cases. But the funny thing about this is we're running out of this. The world is becoming more and more domesticated, if you think about it. It's maybe domesticated isn't a good word. What I mean is it's more interjoined than it ever has been at any point in our history. You have countries that are dependent on each other. I kind of learned something interesting with this whole oil thing that's going on, with the Strait of Hormuz, is that in the United States, we have what's called sweet oil. I could never have told you anything about that until, we experienced something like this. But apparently our refineries are not necessarily built to process crude. So we ship a lot of our resources overseas for them. They ship a lot of resources over for us. Don't ask me why it is the way it is. I have no clue. But, so the simple question would be, well, why can't we just change our refineries here in the United States to process this so-called sweet oil? And it's cost billions of dollars to do. So I find that interesting. We experienced in COVID where we get a lot of our products from China. And so the world's never been more intertwined than it ever has been. And then, so that becomes the question is it just the United States that's experiencing this epidemic? This apathy that has come over our kiddos, this laziness that's been coming up for at least the last 20 years? The short answer is yes. It absolutely is. You have issues in China with the same thing. USSR, Russia, Europe, it's all over the place. The only places that you don't see it as much is those countries where they're poor. And it takes some hustle to support your family. And generally, it's a family affair, meaning that kids as early as 10 years old, maybe even younger, have to do some form of work just so that the whole family can eat. I mean, it's kind of crazy. So I really feel like it's a world thing. And quality has been very, very, there are some countries like I feel like are very quality folks. Like I have a high respect for Japan just from what I see about Japanese culture and the emphasis on cleanliness and, the kids. Like the things that I've seen, and maybe I'm wrong, but these are just things that I've seen, are read about or seen on YouTube. I unfortunately have never been to Japan. I wished I had the kind of money to be a world traveler, but I don't. But the things that I do see, is that kids are taught cleanliness at an early age. That down to the point that the school systems don't necessarily have janitors, that the kids are taught to clean up after themselves. Also, I've seen where that they eat more quality food than we put in our own school systems. So, yeah, I have a great respect for that because the earlier you start, the more it's going to bleed into adulthood and young adulthood. So, I mean, yeah, I think that across the world we see reporting of low motivation, short attention spans, and a growing sense of mental fatigue. All right. Um, it's called burnout, overstimulation. I personally like entitlement because I honestly feel like what I've seen, just I teach and I see a lot of entitlement amongst my students where, they just get stuff. They get the latest, that, and the other. The parents get caught up in keeping up with what other people have. Here recently, it's kind of like the e-bike boom in my area where everywhere I look, there are kids on e-bikes. And these, I asked one of my students, he actually knew how much it cost. He didn't even bat an eye at how much it cost. It's just like, well, all my friends have it, so my parents got it for me. This, as far as I know, no, there's no chores or anything expected of this child. So it's just kind of like, okay, but yeah, everybody else's kids had it, and my neighbors and whatnot. And, this is, I'm pretty sure they're going for like about $600, and that's one that goes, 35 miles per hour, but they go fast. I mean, come on. Growing up, I was a free range kid. I was, basically a teen and young kiddo with recess and all that during the 80s. I was an 80s kid. So, free range kid. Come home whenever the streetlights come on, and if you miss dinner, you go to bed without food. No late night snacking. You eat your three. You get soda at a limited capacity. That was a specialty item that you got once in a while. But for the most part, yeah, we ate homemade everything. Eating out wasn't something that was a thing. It was a special event to go get pizza. And we did it maybe like once a month. So, yeah, is our lifestyle affecting this? Come on. I mean, how does this play into other faiths? I know as a Christian how I see it, but this also creates an avoidance mentality. People start avoiding responsibility, declining work ethic, like we just talked, increased dependent on convenience. So, I mean, that's troublesome if you have to have a convenient lifestyle. Rise and I'll do it later lifestyle. So we used to say in the why put off what you can do today, tomorrow. And a culture that celebrates comfort over discipline. I see, part of the reason why I teach martial arts. So I seen over, I don't know, the 80s. We had Mr. Miyagi in the 80s, but before that we had Bruce Lee in the 70s. But it's very attractive for parents to put their kids in a karate class so that it will teach them discipline. And I would say that discipline is something that's taught at home. We have forgotten about that. And what is that? How does that affect a kid? Well, let's just say one side effect is if we want to say the laziness epidemic, we definitely have an obesity issue in the United States. And there are other countries that experience it too. So laziness does equal that. And you know what? It takes discipline to keep yourself at a healthy weight. And it takes discipline to lose weight whenever you need to. We didn't see these kind of weight issues in the 70s and 60s, even the 80s, because kids got off of the video games, got off of scrolling, got off of screens in general, and were outside playing, doing something physical. And not only that, they were physically communicating. See, we have kiddos that are subject to the easy. Relationships become inappropriate interactions such as websites or apps. Relationships don't grow organically. They're again through websites or apps. The ability to adapt to a relationship. We want to date somebody who's just like us. We don't want to have to work for it. And that's part of why there's such a rise in divorce. There's other contributing factors to that, yes. But is there a rise in divorce? Absolutely. Why? Because we don't have any coping skills. I've seen grown men throw fits in their 20s. And I would say that a full-on temper tantrum is allowable till about the age of 13. And then after that, there needs to be something done about that. So we see all of these things happening, and it's just crazy to me. But I didn't grow up in that time. There's no ability to cope. Everybody wants things done for them. And the people who know how to do things, guess what? They literally are a dying breed. We no longer appreciate our elders. People that are older are just an inconvenience anymore that need to be put away, put out of sight. Oh, that person whipped out some cash in the line. We're going to be here forever because the teller or the person working the restaurant wasn't taught how to count money back. We have kids that go to credit cards over putting money back and saving. They're learning the credit card. Someone that I know literally used a credit card for everything and just got used to paying on the credit card versus just paying for it out of their check. They put everything in their bank, then pay the credit card, and they paid everything else on the credit card. And don't get me wrong, I'm not knocking credit cards. You pretty well have to have a credit card to build credit to buy anything. But I'm just saying, for it to be a dependence of paying regular bills, or it's just it becomes a bill because you don't know how to pay it off, and you're paying compounded interest on things all the time. Come on. But that goes to doing a budget. I recently had a kid that's in my class. He didn't know how to do his checkbook, didn't know how to do a budget. Raised by Christian parents. It's not a religion thing there. Actually, I think that I wonder, and this would be something that I would ask anybody listening to this, shoot me an email into here, just ufsessions@gmail.com. Tell me I don't care what religion you are. This is a religious podcast, but it is more, or a religious channel. But at the same time, this is about general shared values as well. We can talk about differences in what I believe and you believe. If even Christians don't agree on everything, but the point is that there's got to be some kind of fruit that we can bear as a society to improve our kids. So, I mean, I don't care if you're Muslim, whatever. I would be curious to hear if you, in your faith congregation or faith group experience this issue with a decline in work ethics, and so on. And don't just call in to brag about it and say, "Oh yeah, blah 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 blah." No, just be honest. Let's be honest. Let's cut through the BS. Stop posturing. I'm better than you kind of crap. We don't need it. We don't get anywhere that way. We've spent the last how many millennia of cultures competing for who's the best instead of just getting down to what's honest and just cut through the crap. We see these things. I would be curious to hear from you. Like I said, once again, I'll say it again at the end of the program, but it is ufsessions.com, or not .com, ufsessions@gmail.com. But like I said, I feel like laziness is an epidemic. What are some of the side effects of this? Well, I feel like we're growing cold, period. Our communities are getting colder. Personal growth, another one. It's another great thing to point out here is if you don't have anything that challenges you or work ethic or whatnot, guess what? You're going to see a stagnation in personal growth. People they don't learn empathy. They become the apathy. It makes the empathy go away. And we are getting colder. And with that comes, broken families. They don't want to sacrifice for each other anymore. Economic strain. Guess what? Yeah, if productivity drops, then guess what? The economy starts having problems. And then here again, spiritual numbness. We just start chasing things. We're no longer looking inward. We're looking outward. We're looking for things to distract us. We're looking for a drug. We're looking for a party. We're looking for an act, something to keep us from looking inward. And I'm going to go into my side of it. What does the Bible say about this? Well, the Bible doesn't necessarily say laziness, but it talks about apathy. Like you take Proverbs. In Proverbs, it says a little sleep, a little slumber, and poverty will come on you like a thief. Now, what does that mean? Laziness wasn't just personal. It was a threat to survival. Think about that. If you were lazy, you didn't go get water. We live in a time of running water. We live in a time where we can go to the store and buy our food. We didn't have to slaughter it. I find it funny. My wife, she kills me sometimes. We were in Sam's Club the other day, all right? Because I'm a bargain shopper, man. Aldi's and Sam's Club, man, they're my jams. And I found 2 fish. They were red tilapia, but they were full fish. She was flipped out about it. And I'm like, why? This looks pretty fresh. She goes, because it looked like fish. If I'd shown her tilapia that had already been filleted and you couldn't see the skin or the head or anything like that, no problem. If I had taken those home, cut the heads off, filleted them and done just the same, she wouldn't eat it because she saw its face, I think. Can you imagine if you had to slaughter beef or you had to, kill chickens? We seen an episode of Survivor, yeah. We're those people. We like Survivor too, where they had to kill a chicken. It was pretty dang traumatic for the group. And I'm not saying taking life should be trivial. You should definitely respect where your food comes from. You should respect the life that was taken so that you could live. Absolutely. But, if it was down to the kids today, they would, I think most of them would starve. Oh no, well, you can't do that. The other thing about it is also the diligence, like, God rewards diligence. In the book of Hebrews, it warns you not to become sluggish. Don't be lazy, slow to respond. Slow to respond to God, slow to grow, slow to obey. We have to be diligent, from Joseph to Ruth to Paul. Scripture consistently evaluates people who work with purpose, excellence, and consistency. All right, you got to think about that. That is how the Bible rolls. The Bible is, you have to stay up on that stuff. And it's a heart issue too. If you become lazy, your heart becomes lazy. You love less, and you want more stuff. You avoid responsibility, you avoid growth, you avoid obedience, and all of these things help you become a better person, which gives you a better heart. It also makes you a better mate, makes you a better husband, makes you a better wife, makes you a better parent. All these things are necessary. Society today is invested in comfort culture. I always say that it's microwave society because you need instant this, instant that, so that you can have instant gratification. You can't wait for nothing. Anymore. Let's just go back to credit cards and do a thing. Instead of saving for that brand new bike, you just put it on a credit card. Boom. There's no anticipation. There's no nothing. Nothing. Buy it, and then you pay on it for longer than you probably would if you just saved for it. We don't think about things like that. There's no anticipation. Whenever you want to look at an inappropriate website, rather than wait for marriage, I am a big believer in waiting for marriage because I believe that it's less messy. And marriage is hard enough without making it more messy. Less baggage, less trauma, the potential for, not illegitimate children, but broken families and stuff, kids feeling like they aren't completely a part of the family because, their dad stepped out, vacant parents, waiting really is the better option. But you can't wait. So you go to an appropriate website. Guess what? It fades into that. It bleeds into it because then you become, overstimulated, creating overcompensating dopamine levels to where your partner is no longer good enough for you. When you scroll, you have idealized content. You take Instagram. You're seeing the ideal version. Nobody ever puts their boo-boos online. They avoid it at all costs. So you're just seeing the idealized situation, the ideal life. You're seeing the highlight reel of somebody's life rather than the actual part of the life where it is like a wave. You have the trough and you have the crest and everything in between. There's peaks and valleys in life. We forget about that whenever we're online. Not to mention fitness influencers. You do not see them after they had a big meal and they've got a little bulge there. They've got a little bit more belly than they're showing. When you see them, they've fasted, they've worked out, they've got a tan, or they have done some kind of a enhancement, like changing body angles, to emphasize what they are trying to focus on so that you don't see what they're trying to hide. They're camera angles, digital imaging, now with AI, it's just so much easier to doctor images. But your brain's taking that in and you're comparing it to yourself. It's negative. Okay? And the thing is we become an overstimulated society. We scroll probably more than we pray, more than we reflect on ourselves, more that we think about what we want to do in life. We spend that time scrolling. And then, responsibility. We stop, you know, we normalize things. Haven't you ever seen that? You normalize, for instance, you take inappropriate content, you normalize that stuff in your mind, and now it's an expectation of your partner. Well, what about their comfort level? What are you doing to try to please them instead of it being about you? Do people start becoming objects to you rather than people? Well, that's what happens. We normalize things that we see. You know, think about violence in video games, and now look how normal violence is. Think about this. Think about how many times you've seen violent acts on the news. It seems like it's an everyday occurrence, and you get numb to it. Just like right now, we're in, think about the Ukraine war, for instance. How, it's just normal now. It's not a shock. You know, even though there's still lots of death and destruction, hey, we've had it hammered down our throats so much that it's just Tuesday. Same thing with other things, and what happens whenever we do that? We don't steward each other. We're not building each other up. We're actually starting to tear people down, because whenever people become objects and not people, guess what? If they don't meet a standard that you have in your mind, then guess what happens? They're immediately defective in your mind, which isn't fair. We also lose our purpose and the idea of what sacrifice is for another individual, because we're too busy getting to scrolling. And the other thing about it is I do feel like, especially now, our generation and generations that are coming, society in generally, it's starting to starve. We're not getting our morality nourished. We're not getting not even getting a sense of positive self-image nourished. Everything is a comparison, even down to what you see on the commercials now. I rarely see commercials for anything else other than drugs to take for a disease of some sort. Whether it's STD or it's a skin disease, something with your heart, something with your blood pressure. It doesn't matter. It's all about that. And when I was a kid, we seen commercials for like Fruity Pebbles or Flintstone vitamins, Big Wheels, toys. That was what we seen most of whenever we were kids. Now it's all about ED pills and Rogaine and weight loss too. I mean, it's all really crazy. It's all these one-stop shops. Pills in a lot of cases. Now, granted, if it's for a disease, this is totally different. But the amount of weight loss stuff and shortcuts that we have today, although there are people that need it, how many people abuse it? I bet you there are more people that abuse it than need it. And there's absolutely no focus on health. Its focus is on quick fixes and energy drinks, So I guess we're coming up onto this. What do we do about this? I really want to hear back from you on this. What do you think we need to do this as a society? Not as an individual, because it's just not going to work. It has to be a social movement to correct these kind of things. Well, for one, I think that we need to learn how to start teaching the positivity of discipline. This is beyond religion. This is just being a person. This is contributing to society. I think schools need to put recess back in play, not just make it a footnote. Personally, I think that schools need to stop focusing on things that are not learning. Math, reading, History. We need history because we learn from history. We learn whenever you can see the mistakes of other cultures. But another thing, focus on maybe borrow from China. Stop pushing kids so hard at such a young age. Start treating them like children. Start teaching them basic ethics, like how to bathe. Well, not necessarily how to bathe. That's probably more the parents' thing, but how to clean up after yourself. I'm not saying like put spanking back in. I think that, I grew up in a spanking era, and I think that's really, that's something that more is a personal decision of raising that are parents driven, not necessarily school driven. Schools to get out of grooming things too. They need to go at a different pace than what schools push them about maturity. You know, Stop pushing them into being too knowledgeable about things that they don't even understand, such as sex. Such as gender equality. That is not something, that should even be in schools. If you look at kids and you put a bunch of kids from all different all different races, all different colors, all different sexes in the same room, they just want to play. They could really care less about black, white, yellow, red. They don't care. If you're cool, that's all they care about. We don't start getting super prejudiced until we start involving ourselves in the process. We start inflicting our personal history on kids. So leave them alone. Let them develop naturally and stop trying to push the pace. Stop trying to make them choose stuff that they're not even ready to choose yet. Because that's where overload comes from. Think about it. If you're working all the time, you're always tired. You got to have a break. Let kids have recess again. Let kids be kids. Stop trying to push adult issues on them too fast. And also sports, man. Young kids should not be in travel ball at the age of 6 or even at that. Anything before middle school, kids should not be doing that, where it is a nightly practice, a nightly this or whatever, using sports to get a leg up on a scholarship or whatever. Also, if we want a better society, we need to make college more available. It's expensive for everybody. This has nothing to do with race. College is expensive, and it is a product where kids don't go to really learn. I think trade schools almost are better anymore. Colleges get in the way. We have plenty of kids where I work that get out of college and they don't know crap because anything with college is behind what the workforce is already into. Generally, trade schools are pretty much looking at the latest things, where college is usually a year or two behind. And professors enforce their political views, their spiritual views, and their sexual views on the students. Stop it. Stop doing that. It's not your business to teach them what you think. Our professors, a lot of them should be fired. If they're grooming the kids to think a certain political way instead of making them free thinkers. That was the point of college, is to give them discernment, to give them an open, the ability to think for themselves. College doesn't do that anymore. College is trying to make them think a certain way, or they're not going to get a good grade if they don't think the same way the professor is. You should be fired if you're this kind of a professor. You should teach kids to think critically. And you know what? Maybe it's different than yours, but if they made a good point, they did good work, it shouldn't matter if it conflicts with your point of view. So shame on you if you're this kind of a person. Nobody has any tolerance to hear something other than what they think is right. Whenever right isn't always that subjective. Sometimes there's multiple right answers. Two things can be correct without the other person being completely wrong. We need to limit our kids' ability to screen time, do so much gaming, do so much screen time scrolling. It really should be limited. They need time to reflect and renew their mind and process their day other than just when they're sleeping. We need to teach kids how to be responsible. We need to know for them to take responsibility for their actions. We also need to teach kids about the value of serving each other, walking in purpose, and also having a spiritual side. Spirituality is a very, very important part of a person's being. It really is. Something to create a moral compass is what they need. We need to provide that. Not because God needs your productivity, but because productivity requires participation. Get you off the couch, get you off the gaming console, get you off your phone. Even get you out of the classroom, get you into being with each other, working with each other, meeting people, growing relationships organically instead of on some app that tells you who you should best match with. The thing is, these are so important. So that's all I've got, but I really want to hear how you feel about it. You can leave it in the comments. I always, on these videos, leave the comments open. Like I said, or you can send an email to ufsessions@gmail.com. And if you have any topics that you think are interesting or would like to be put out there and kind of follow in the comments, by all means do so. I don't judge you because you believe different than me, but I do want to hear why you believe the way you believe. Why do things mean a way to you? I think that that's interesting, and it's something that we all need to do more of. Anyway, I will talk to you next time. Remember, hit me up at ufsessions@gmail.com if you have anything that you want to think would be fun to talk about, or if you just have an opinion. Have a good one.